This chapter is talking about motor development, and this is a key component to make sure that you understand the fundamental movement patterns, which will then help you do assessment. So the motor development is changes in movement over time due to interaction of growth as well as maturation of the nervous system. So for instance, I know a physical therapist who she worked with a child who was 2, who couldn't sit up, who couldn't walk, but the environment made that happen because the child was in a house that had a dirt floor and so was never put down on the ground to work on those skills. So it is driven by that maturation of the nervous system, so it needs to be stimulated. So one of those things that needs to be stimulated was developed by Carl Newell, and it is these 3 constraints that need to happen. So there's individual constraints, task constraints, and then environmental constraints. These 3 play into what the child is able to do for their motor development. So there are some key terms that I want to make sure that you understand. The first one is development. This is the changes in capacity across the age span. So from kindergarten all the way up to, well, actually from birth all the way up to death. Maturation is the progress towards adult status, and so this is when the organs and cells are developing. And the last one is growth, and this is where the body mass increases in size. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's development through cognition. It just means that the body is growing. Now there are some characteristics of motor development. It does involve change in movement, and it is sequential, so you have to be able to crawl before you can creep, and after you creep then you can then stand, and then you stand, and then you take your first step. So everything is sequential. I think this model is a really good one to show you how these constraints go into this hourglass figure, because all of them come in together and then make basically the sand flow from wide into middle and then down. And so all of these constraints play into how that hourglass flows. So if one area is bigger, then the hourglass isn't going to be even and you're not going to be able to develop and change into the person that you're supposed to be. So that's where the changes come with students with special needs. So just to give you a little bit more background, the individual constraint is inside or internal, and there's structural as well as functional constraints with this. So it's related to the body structure, so their height, their weight, if they have muscle mass, this would be a constraint. If they have no muscle mass, then they aren't going to be able to stand up. The functional constraints are behavioral, and so do they have the motivation to work on standing, or are they not able to function and so they're just going to sit there in your class. The next one is environmental constraints, and this is where it's outside of the body, properties of the world. So for instance, even a ramp. So if a ramp isn't there, then they can't get down to maybe the other level if they're in a wheelchair. Gravity always is against us, and so that is one environmental culture part. And then there's the surface. So when you're walking on the surface, maybe they're walking and they trip over a part of the sidewalk that's uneven. So those are different constraints that you need to make sure that you're paying attention to. The last one is the task constraint. And this is external of the body as well, and it's related to specific tasks or skills that the student is able or not able to do. So for instance, they need to be able to do the goal of the task. They need to have rules for the task performance, and so that's where that assessment piece comes in, and what type of equipment. So if you're playing hockey and there's a student that is in a wheelchair, maybe you have an extension for that hockey stick so they could be in your regular class but still participate. So these 3 constraints need to very much be taken into consideration. Now there are categories of movement: stability, locomotor, and manipulative. Stability movements would be your balancing. So again, you need to see if your student can balance, because if they can't balance, then there are some movements that they aren't going to be able to do. If they have to cut or get away or dodge a ball, they aren't going to be able to do that because they might fall. The locomotion part then is your movement, your run, your hop, your skip. What are they able and not able to do? And then the manipulation would be manipulating objects. So maybe they hit a balloon with their hand, or maybe it's with a bat. Now there is a motor development theoretical framework called the dynamic systems theory, and this is where the body system spontaneously self-organizes how the motor development is going to happen within the body. And so I would strongly encourage you to look more into the book about that one. There are two components of the dynamic systems theory, and this is one is affordances, and the other is called a rate limiter. Affordances is when there are enabling factors. So the function an environment object provides in an individual. So these are things that allow the student to be able to function in society. So maybe an external part is having a walker, so they're more stable, so that constraint can be helped. Then the rate limiters are the inhibiting factors. So what is it? Is it the stairs that's in front of them? What are the inhibiting factors that could play into this? Now there are different phases of the motor development. I'm going to go just quickly through them because you will not be tested greatly on them, but I just wanted to make sure that you understood. The reflexive part. So the first one is reflexive, and this is when a child is at birth, or if the developmental levels are so low, they might be at this level. So if they can't keep their head up, this would be considered a reflexive movement. Now one part of reflexive is like if you touch a baby's face, they're going to turn towards you. That's called that sucking reflex. The next one is called the fundamental movement patterns, and there's an initial, elementary, and mature stage that students go through, and so they have to be able to walk before they can run and so forth. Then those specialized movements are when you're getting into more of the technique component, and so these all play into this the hourglass model, which Gallahue has developed, where the motor development is through a lifespan. So they have to be able to do these fundamental movements in order to be able to be successful in life there. So here's a few of the infant reflexes. Primitive reflex, the Morrow. So for instance, like your grandma has her arms out and then she wants to hold the baby, and you put the baby out in front of you. Automatically the arms and legs go forward, so it looks like the baby wants to go to grandma, but actually this is just a reflex. So don't tell grandma that, but that would be considered a reflex. Now the postural reflexes are the ones that then helps the baby sit, then stand, and go from there. So again, you'll have students that are at this level. The next one then is that rudimentary part where they're beginning to do the movement. They're able to control their trunk a little bit more. So they're able to control the upper half of their body. So they're controlling their head, their neck. They're able to sit and stand. So if you have a student in this level, there'll be other activities that you'll be able to do from the waist up. Now, helping the student, you would take activities away that would be waist down because they are not capable of doing that quite yet. The next step is then the fundamental movement pattern of the next would be then the fundamental movement patterns, which at the middle school and high school level, your mid to moderate students with special needs are going to be at this level. This is where they're starting to work on their throwing, their catching, their kicking. And again, there's an elementary level, intermediate, and then advanced. And so if I had time, I'd go through all those slides, but you do have a whole nother class, if you so choose to, called Motor Learning that goes into all those in detail. There is additional reading about the fundamental movement patterns that you can find in Blackboard, and I would encourage you to do that. This was just the short, the dirty, just getting you the very basic information about the fundamental movement patterns that relate to that assessment piece that is so very important. So thanks again for listening. I appreciate your efforts in dealing with Blackboard Collaborate, and hopefully next week will be smoother. Have a great night.